All right. Well, it is Digital Citizenship Week. I'm so excited about that. And we have one of my good friends and colleagues from the Tulare County area, Lisa Lemus. I'm so glad you joined me for coffee. Do you have your coffee with you, Lisa?
Always,
Oh,
every, especially
same.
on a Monday.
Good point. Good point. And we're talking about not just digital citizenship, but digital citizenship in regards to mental health and how balance fits in this world. And Lisa, you've done a lot with social emotional learning and equity work and such. And so, gosh, when the COVID-19 pandemic came and kids were on their devices, adults were on their devices. Um, that really got me thinking a lot about how digital citizenship also has to do with social emotional learning, right?
Mm, yeah,
So the first competency of SEL is self-awareness.
right.
And I don't know about you, but I had to like build a lot of self-awareness during that time about the need for balance.
Sure.
What do you do to try and have balance in your world that relies on, I mean, we're on a digital device right now, right? So
Yeah.
what tips do you have that you just use in your personal life?
Well, I have to start with when you just said the COVID-19 pandemic, just like that in a phrase, it brought me right back to that time. And I just remember I remember when we first were told to stay home, I was following every news channel I could follow every moment of the day for updates. I
Mm.
was soaking in every report I could soak in. And there was I feel like that was one of my first self-awareness wake up calls was there was at one point it was just causing me so much anxiety because it was too much to understand and there was too much that was unknown. And so I had to set a boundary with the intake of information during that time. And that's something that's carried over post-pandemic for me. So when there's events happening in the world and then you try to be a well-rounded citizen. So you're trying to take in as much information and as balanced as possible, but then you have to set a personal limit too of like, okay, here's my locus of control and here's how much information I can take in per day. It's like having a relationship with another human. You have to set boundaries.
Yeah,
And you
that's a good
gotta
point. I
yeah.
see Jennifer's on the Zoom with us. Welcome. We are having our coffee and talking about um, the intersections of social emotional learning and digital citizenship in this digitally inundated world, right? So absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. I also remember that COVID-19 pandemic time being a time where it just really showed the need for balance. Absolutely. So good morning, Jennifer. Thanks for being here with us. We have our coffee. Not sure if you have your coffee too, but that's something
I
that's
do. Yeah, good
awesome.
morning.
I'm so glad you're here. Great to
Me
see you.
too. Yeah, thanks for hosting this. I was just looking up Citizenship Week resources, Digital Citizenship Week, and I just saw your webpage on the CDE website. I was like, oh wow, this is happening right now. How exciting.
Yay.
Thanks for
Perfect.
organizing all of this. And your webpage looks great with all the updates.
Well, thank you. I have to say that's mostly my colleague, Christina Mattis, our new broadband coordinator.
No, I
Um,
appreciate it. Yeah, well, thanks to Christina as well, posting the resources and creating these open spaces to chat about them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. And then Christina's going to be hosting a chat at noon as well about the same topic about balance and such. So yeah, so it's going to be good. So Jennifer, what about you? What do you do to maintain balance in our
Mm.
digitally inundated worlds?
Well, I've been more intentional about not working as much on the weekends,
Mm,
and kind of disconnecting and spending more time in nature, especially on the weekends. But I know it's important to do that during the work week and even the work day as well.
yeah, absolutely. I had read so I'll be honest, like Lisa was talking about information overload. And so I do a lot of reading. Like I read a lot of news articles and research that's come out and such, but I don't spend the time to like actually remember where all the sources are from. So I'm going to talk about something that I don't remember the exact source, but apparently there was a study I read about that talked about how this study was done and determined that if after every 20 minutes, you need to move for 5 minutes, like in order to counteract, like don't just sit, a lot of times we'll sit on a meeting for 2 hours, right? And maybe we take a break, but we only take one break. And do we actually stand up and walk around, or do we check our email? And I'm guilty of this, right? And then that makes me think about our students. Like, what are our do our students have a chance to get up and look away from their device, or just get up at all, right? So
yeah, it does start with ourselves. I mean, we're thinking about creating resources for students, of course, but even just our behavior, what we model with each other has an effect on so many other educators who we come into contact with, then what they're modeling, and then how that affects the youth that they are serving. So I appreciate that point. And you know what? I think that was related to the study at Stanford about creativity and movement. And they did a study, it might be the same one.
I think it might be.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember this part of it, that they compared people who were sitting in a meeting to people who went outside to have a walking meeting in nature. And the people who went outside for their meeting compared to people who were inside sitting were 40% more creative. And those who went outside for the walking meeting were 60% more creative. So being in nature, being outside makes you more creative, and then moving outside in nature makes you more creative than just sitting at a computer. So
I love
that was really interesting.
That is interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hi, Scott. I see you there. Go ahead, Jennifer. Sorry.
No, it's all good. Hi, Scott and Lisa. Hi.
Good to see you, Scott. We are talking balance for Digital Citizenship Week. This year, the focus is how the digital world affects our mental health. So talking a little bit about that. And I know something I've been thinking about a lot, and something that I know Scott's been working with as well, is the influence of this whole AI world, right? Because I know, Lisa, you were talking about during the COVID-19 pandemic, how there was like information overload of all these things that you wanted to keep up with. And I've been thinking a little bit about how with AI, the news that we get is curated, like even our social media posts and everything. If I press like, then the algorithm's going to steer me to one direction, not another. And what does that do to our mental health if we don't see a broad understanding of things, right? So that's been something I've been kind of thinking about. I know, Scott, you've done some work with young students about kind of understanding how that technology works and such as well, which is awesome.
They're very engaged with that. I mean, when we ask them about their Netflix feeds and how their Netflix feed differs from their parents, it's the most excited I saw during my observations for the case study. They were thrilled to talk about that because it's connecting to their personal lives. So that's very motivating.
Yeah. And this was elementary kids that you were working with, right?
3rd and 4th graders. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's great. And we're teaching them at that age how this digital world works. I think that's part of digital citizenship, right? And so, yeah, that's huge. And it all fits together, right? Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about self-awareness in regards to our SEO competency. And then the next one is well, I always go in a certain order, Lisa knows it. In my mind, self-management, we talked a little bit about that too, about how we model having some balance, looking away from the screen, making sure we're managing our intake of tech. But what about for students? What are our ideas on how to teach students how to be mindful of the digital inputs that come into their brains.
Mhm. I really like this point. Thanks for bringing it up. If I could just add a little bit. So, and also back to your point about AI being critical consumers of our social media and how AI feeds into that. I think it relates back to a concept of empowerment for students.
Mm.
So developing that critical digital citizenship to be aware of who is profiting from their time spent on different social media sites and platforms, and being aware of just the larger context of capitalism and how they are being used, as pawns for profit with time spent on different platforms, and then also how engaging in different types of posts profit some people over others, and that extractive dynamic of tech. And so then understanding it from that critical lens, they can make informed decisions about how they want to engage on various platforms, which type of content they would like to engage with. And so then I think that can inform their self-management and our own as adults about how we're using technology critically, how we're engaging with social media. And then again, back to the generative AI conversation. In this new book, The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman, he even mentions, he relates it back to the butterfly effect, right? Just how just our micro interactions can be cumulative toward movements. So how can we make these informed decisions, even just small ones, moment by moment, what to engage with, when, how that will affect our own well-being, and then how it could collectively come together to inform what could be a better future, depending on what decisions are made.
Yeah. And Scott said great book as well. So that's one I'm going to have to check out. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's one of the scary, it talks about the perils and the possible dangers of AI, but the author is one of the founders of an early AI company and very knowledgeable. A lot of relevant experience there.
Yeah, yes. He was one of the founders of DeepMind, which was purchased by Google.
Right.
So we get to kind of trace this story, which starts around 2010, but he goes back, of course, much further to AI, like in the 50s, and even the history of technological movements historically, like the Industrial Revolution, just more broadly connected. So yeah, it's like this cross-disciplinary or cross-content study connections that we can make with this critical digital citizenship approach.
I liked what you said about moment by moment, like having that self-awareness and management moment by moment.
Yeah.
I think that's key. And a lot of that, like in the classroom, is just having conversations with kids about even our own, the notifications, especially if you're in like a middle school, high school class that has, the cell phones are, if cell phones are not banned and such.
Yeah.
I think, and even with adults, like in meetings,
Yeah.
That's a challenging one too, because everybody kind of learns differently. And when we talk about balance, like what works for me, Lisa and I have done a lot with Universal Design for Learning, and the idea that there's so much variability in individuals. And so for me, like if you ask me to close my computer during a meeting to be present, I'm not going to be present because I'm going to be mad that you because that's the way I learn. Like if somebody says something that interests me, I want to look it up right then or take note on it on my computer, not on a piece of paper. Right. And so, and we're all different. So I think it's important that we validate the fact that everyone has these different ways of balance, and that balance for one person might be different than balance for another person. Like I know there was a time where I used to send emails at like 10 p.m. because I wanted to go home early and spend time with my son. And then when everyone went to sleep, I would send emails, right? For me, that was balance. I didn't want to stay late at school. But then I started scheduling them because sometimes that freaked people out, like, oh, why are you sending emails at 10 p.m.? So, but that's just it. It's different for everyone. So
Yeah, I'm the same way, Kat. Same thing. I'm like, I don't know if it's ADHD or what, but I need to be able to like type notes. Sometimes I have my little handwritten notebook to go with it, but that's my way of engaging. And I agree, we have to promote that voice and choice and don't just restrict it. Don't assume that compliance is engagement just because someone's sitting there staring at you during a meeting, or during class.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing, schedule send. Please do that, people, with your emails instead of sending it on the weekend. Try to model working during the work week. Schedule send your emails for Monday morning at 8 o'clock or whatever is the best time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's the best way. I think with the vein that we're on right now is the best way to help kids self-manage is knowing that we have choices in how we're engaging. And so it's not the tech's fault. If we're distracted, like because you even brought up as adults, Kat, if I'm checking my emails during whatever's happening in the meeting, that's not the computer being open's fault. That is my fault. I'm mismanaging myself in this meeting, or the facilitation of the meeting is being mismanaged. I don't know which one.
That's what I was gonna
say. I may be a mixture of both, right?
Right.
But like helping students to find their way in different situations, what's going to work for them, because taking digital notes and being able to, somebody mentions the name of a book, I can pull up that book name, I can flag that, I'm going to buy that on Amazon as soon as, like those sorts of things happening in meeting, for some is not distracting, it's engaging. And then for others, I might have to write it in my journal and go look it up later, because if I start getting on that, my brain will be on another thing. And every student should be able to know for themselves what their best way to navigate is using tech or versus not using tech in any given moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I want to add a resource. There's an article I'm going to add to the chat. It's new in Time Magazine, How to Stop Doom Scrolling and Find Meaning on Social Media. And this was actually co-written by one of my colleagues at Berkeley School of Education. And she's also with the School of Journalism now, Andrea Lampros. And I think it's really relevant, especially right now with what's happening in the Middle East. We see, tragically, these terrible images of war in Israel, Palestine, the Gaza Strip, and the horrible attacks on Israel by Hamas. And it's a lot to take in. It's terrible, and I think it's just another moment to examine. What are we seeing? How are we interacting with that? And what is actually misinformation or disinformation versus credible journalistic reporting, and what's actually channeling us to do something about it, right? To address a humanitarian crisis versus perpetuating conflict. And so I think this article is helpful to try to channel that interest that may manifest as the doom scrolling towards something more meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really leads to, I mean, we're talking about how individuals feel like our own mental health when we're doom scrolling, so to speak, but that also can affect our relationships with others. And so understanding like critical lens and understanding that this might be misinformation and I shouldn't believe everything I read and all those things, which, I've heard a lot of talk about this in the digital world. We got to teach kids not to believe everything that their first result on Google or what ChatGPT tells them. But I mean, this was the case even when we were reading like books and we didn't have the internet yet. Like it was still, you need to be a critical consumer of information. I guess it's just that it's so much more available now that perhaps it's more important. But this is also super interdisciplinary. Like this impacts every single subject area, right?
Mhm.
So all educators, I think, definitely need to kind of consider these things. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I kind of come at it from civics lens, like a
Mm.
social studies teacher for several years. That's kind of the angle I'm coming at it, and I found this really cool resource. It's this website called Civics of Technology, and they're encouraging people to go to make that move. You know, digital citizenship is important and helpful, and then making that move to critical digital citizenship, to be those critical consumers of information, and also critical producers of digital media. And so they have some examples of student created projects. I mean, there are a lot of those, right? Like with project-based learning, and students engaging with digital tools and their communities, and practicing those skills with journalism, student journal, like KQED has some of those
Oh, right,
resources, and
right.
I think it's really helpful to put students in the driver's seat.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're talking about balance here. So I have to say, I'm reminded that after this, in 6 minutes or whatever, when this chat finishes, I need to look away from my screen and walk around, because it's something, I always kind of forget about too. But
That's right. Yeah, it's like go from cyborg to human, cyborg to human.
back and forth. Absolutely. So, but yeah, that civics lens, I think, is really, really helpful, especially in this age where, like artificial intelligence is in your face, and social media is there all the time. And so I think that's excellent, an excellent point. And there's some dangers to mental health. I mean, there's like the way the algorithms work. If I click once on something that is, that is not serving my mental health and is harmful, then it's going to keep coming up, right? And so that's tricky. And so I think we have to really help students understand and navigate that as well. So yeah, I mean, I remember even like whatever is inputted into your, it's kind of like AI. Whatever's inputted into your brain, like, is going to affect how you feel and your output, right? So we have to be careful of what we're allowing. I remember even like as a junior higher or middle schooler, whatever you want to call it, the music that you listen to, right? And I remember like you just start thinking of like those lyrics and how impactful, must that it impacts you, right? So yeah, definitely something to consider. But I think it would be good to end on a good note. I'm super excited that we're having this conversation. And there are certainly so many concerns and dangers out there in regards to technology, but there's also some positives, right? I know Lisa knows I have that I was able to track data about Elisa just dropped something in the chat. AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. Absolutely.
Delayed
I've had conversations
a few
about
minutes
that.
ago. I finally got the link in.
I love it. Yeah. But with that, like there are some great apps and technology supports that can help our mental health. I know there are apps that listen to the voice, the way people are talking, and so if there's someone that, for example, like has schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or such, it will notice like, oh, I think your voice, it is showing that you need to be careful because you're going to have an episode soon, or whatever it may be. There are the Calm app. A lot of people like the Calm app, right? I don't use that myself, but there are ways, even our devices that tell us how much screen time we had. So do any of you have any tech, like tech things that actually help you with balance? Any tech apps or tips that you've used?
Yes. Instagram. I made that tell me to get off after 15 minutes. So I get the notification. I mean, it lets me go longer if I really want to, but at least at least it's a reminder like, hey, you've already been on here 15 minutes. If you don't want to spend more than this amount on it today, then get off now.
I like that. That's good. All right. Scott or Lisa, do either of you have any tech tips for balance? Any things you've used?
I have some tips from one of the first books I read about all this was called Social Media Wellness by Anna Humian. I hope I said her name right. But she talks about talking with students about starting instead of with tech with their values. What's important to you? What are your goals? And I think we can all do the same thing where it's like, what's important to me? And is this technology habit supporting that or taking away from that? So I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Lisa? Do you have any
you mentioned Calm. I am a Calm subscriber, and I know it's a subscription, but I have to say there's a daily move little episode, and so I do love the podcast and I use it for music, but I'm an avid watcher. She gets me moving because it's like less than 10 minutes every day.
Perfect.
So if I'm taking that tech break or that movement break and maybe don't have time for a whole walk or whatnot, that's a good one.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, thank you for dropping in the chat. This is info from the U.S. Surgeon General's Advisory 2023. Thanks, Scott. And it says, among the benefits of social media, adolescents report it helps them feel more accepted, 58%. They have people who can support them through tough times, 67%. A place to show their creative side, 71%. That's awesome because I know that it is research proves that students with mental illness are their symptoms are lessened when they engage in creative activities, and more connected to what's going on in their friends' lives, 80%. And research shows social media may support the mental health and well-being of the LGBTQIA community and other use by enabling peer connection, identity development, and management and social support. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for spending some time with us. We will be having there will be another chat with this topic at noon with Christina Mattis, and for the rest of the week as well. So thanks so much and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thanks for hosting.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.